Thank you for being here, Laura. Thank you. Thank the administration, the students of Lawrence North for letting us come today. I appreciate it. This election is so important and so critical to people that are involved in education, which is every one of the students watching across the state. This election is about the future of Indiana. We are going to be talking in our campaign about the economy and about the need to raise the wages in the state of Indiana. We're going to be talking how you can't do that without having an educated and skilled labor force in the state of Indiana. And then we're going to be talking about our state's infrastructure, the needs for roads and bridges, clean water, sewer, green space, cultural trails, broadband connectivity. And we're going to be talking about the state's drug epidemic, how it's time we deal with it.
And now we will hear from Mr. Bell.
Nice thing about going second, I don't have to worry about forgetting to pick up the mic, so thank you, John. Yeah, I would like to thank the staff and the students at Lawrence North and the Debate Commission for inviting us here today. This is a very important election. I've voted in a lot of them, and this is an exciting one, from national right down to the state, right down to local. Very important, a lot of decisions to be made. We have seen the growth of government over the years and how it's getting more and more involved in our lives, in our education system. We were going to have to make some decisions about how we're going to handle it, how we can keep it sustainable. And I think that, we offer some good solutions for that. I hope that you will all pay attention, study, make your own decisions, and hopefully decide that we have the correct answers.
Next, we'll hear from Mr. Holcomb.
Good morning. What an exciting morning it is. In fact, it's been a very exciting year for some of us, you could say. I have had the real honor of, over my years, serving in different capacities, whether it was in the United States Navy, whether it was serving a former governor, our current United States Senator, or now as your Lieutenant Governor. In all of these posts, I've had the opportunity to try to lead organizations that are attempting to create more opportunity for more people. I've been honored by that service, and that's what this campaign has been all about, creating more opportunity for more people across the whole state of Indiana. This campaign is about the future of the state of Indiana, but more specifically, it's about your future. You're a big, big part of where our state ends up when I think about where we were 10 years ago, where we are today, and with your help, where we're going to be a decade from now. I'm excited to discuss the issues that will affect that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our first question. Asking it is Samantha Ola, a senior at Lawrence North, who brings up an important issue many students addressed as a concern.
How would you go about standardized testing? Do you have a plan to replace the I-STEP?
Yes, we do. I'm very proud that we have talked for the entire campaign about how we have to get back to letting teachers teach. I view the teachers are part of the solution and not part of the problem. And with that said, teaching you the test is what teachers have been forced to do. Many years ago, I was in the legislature, and I voted against the I-STEP testing. I think it is a flawed test. I'm all for accountability, but I think we need to have a better way where you take the test and you get feedback much quicker. The way it is now, you take the test this year, you're in another grade before the teacher gets any feedback, and by that time it's much too late to help you or the teacher. So I think we need quicker feedback, but we still have to have accountability. And had teachers and local school boards been involved in this process rather than shut out, we wouldn't have had this current problem we're dealing with in Indiana.
Mr. Bell?
Well, yeah, we have addressed many times that the testing, specifically the I-STEP test, is very expensive. I think in 2015, they just made an estimate what it was going to cost to run it for the next 2 years, and it was $38 million. And as John pointed out, schools still don't have the results of those tests from last year. So what we would like to see happen is what is happening now. The local schools are developing their own way of determining the tests and the outcome of it. And certainly we have always been in favor of returning more local control to the parents and the teachers and the school boards. The I-STEP is a test that needs to be set aside and that turned over to, as I said, parents, teachers, and the local boards.
On this issue, I think there's universal agreement. I haven't met a single person in my whole time on the campaign trail, or even before that, that is in favor of continuing the I-STEP. It is going away. We need to replace it with a test that is fair and accurate, as was stated, that we get results back quicker, that's graded here, now, fast, so that we actually know what you know and what you don't, and if you're prepared for the next level. This is not just to know, but this is what the workforce of the 21st century is counting on. And so absolutely we need to be testing, we need to monitor progress, and the I-STEP it will move aside, and we'll replace it with something that's much more efficient and with quicker return.
Our next question comes from Dagoberto Morales, a sophomore at Arsenal Tech High School.
How committed are you to helping undocumented high school and college students? Should immigrants be able to qualify for in-state tuition rates at Indiana colleges and universities?
Well, certainly, all students deserve and are provided in our Constitution that they are, to be provided with an education. And, our tax plan that we have presented will collect tax money from all people in the state, not just certain property owners and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that every student deserves an education, and when Indiana is offering that, I think it should be available to all students.
Happy to entertain this topic. It's come up before the General Assembly before. It's not received the traction in recent years. So happy to look at it and the status of the student. But again, I haven't seen the desire in the General Assembly. It's not moved through the committee process in recent years.
In Indiana, the legislature and all of us here that are involved in this, we grasp these problems and tackle them. And one of the problems that we have is that that's not happening at the federal level. And immigration and all that is something that takes place at the federal level. And since they're kind of moribund with fighting and arguing and not getting along, it kind of falls back on the states. And this is a tough decision. To Hoosiers, as I've traveled the state and listened, and as a former president at Vincennes University, I've had people come up to me and say they've spent their lives, they don't remember living anywhere else other than in the state of Indiana, but yet they are not a legal citizen. And this is something that the legislature needs to grapple with. They've been talking about, but I think we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to the extent we can. I think what's happening to students like yourself, if you're in that category, obviously is very unfair to you and no fault of your own. Absolutely.
Thank you. Now we'll hear a question from Aaron Villager, a senior at Columbus East High School.
If you are elected, what will you do to ensure that performing arts and other arts programs continue to be encouraged in schools?
Well, I would be a big champion of them. I attended Hanover College, which is a liberal arts school. I received a wide range of schooling at Pike High School, proud Pike Red Devil. But this is part of the total package of a student's learning. And so while we have to make sure that students are properly equipped for that 21st century workforce and the demands of it, we need to get more STEM programming into our schools, but it needs to be a well-rounded education, including exactly the topic that you bring up.
Thank you. I love that question. I think as we're talking today, we got to realize that STEM, as Mr. Holcomb said, the science, technology, engineering, and math is so important. Half of all jobs right now today in Indiana require some knowledge of it, and it's estimated that 3/4 will require more knowledge and awareness of it. But a lot of people have started talking about STEAM, where we add the A for the arts. As someone who's also a liberal arts major, I think that's very, very important, the well-roundedness of the education. But at the same standpoint, as I've traveled the state, what I hear from business leaders and from mayors is that we need a skilled workforce. So we do this by working with our boards, we do this by working with our teachers, the parents, and the business and civic leaders. It's about being inclusive and listening to everybody. It's listening, learning, and making a decision.
Well, certainly a diversity in education is very important. I also think that we need to remember as we turn control of education back to the parents, back to the teachers, back to the local school boards, every school might not decide on the same thing. I don't think this is something we want the state to hand down and say you have to do exactly this, this, and this. This is what parental choice is about, what the local boards are able to decide, what teachers are able to decide. It may be more important to some groups and not to others. So that's something that we would allow the local schools, the parents, and the teachers to decide on. That's not something that we would want to hand down from the state.
I would like to offer each candidate a 30-second rebuttal, and we'll go in the same order in which we first answered the question.
Well, I'll tell you the other reason that the performing arts needs to be included is because there's different strokes for different folks. And I want to make sure that when you're at school, if you're inspired by a certain discipline or a certain topic, that there is an outlet for you to express your interest in that and grow in that field. Absolutely, we need to make sure we're churning out more scientists and physicists and engineers, ultimately, to meet the workforce demands of the 21st century. However, having said that, it's not for everyone.
I think the arts, so many times people don't really know how to define them. And it means reading and writing and have an appreciation for culture. But it does mean the ability to communicate verbally and in the written way. And this is so important because we do need STEM, and we have to have that for the jobs of the future. And we also have to have an appreciation of the arts. And again, it goes back to having a well-rounded education, which I think is something we all support.
Well, and certainly the well-rounded education is important. I'm not going to make that decision for you. That's something the government shouldn't be making. That should be up to the parents. As I've said before, in a school that offers that, and that's what you desire for your students, that's great. It's not up to the state to step in and say, this is what you're going to teach when we get into that area. So thank you.
I would like to ask the next question. In Indiana, we're facing a shortage of teachers. I would like to ask the candidates, what would you do to ensure that Indiana has a sufficient number of teachers to educate our Hoosier children? And we will begin with Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. The first thing we need to realize and admit is we've created this teacher shortage. We've created this teacher shortage in the last few years by the way we've demeaned those in the education profession, by the way we've done everything to a flawed testing system. And so we need to acknowledge that. Now we need to attract and retain the quality teachers we have. We need to encourage and remind young adults, people like yourselves going to college, the importance of teaching. It is so critical that we attract people to this, but we can only do it by being inclusive and having teachers be part of the discussion, and by having some local control with our boards and with our administrators around. This is what is important, and if we do this, there's going to be more people going into education. But it's got to start with showing respect and recognizing that those who are running our schools are part of the solution and not the problem.
Mr. Bell?
Well, certainly attracting and retaining teachers is very important. And when we look at why we're having trouble, we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Certainly, as Mr. Gregg pointed out, the testing that the government has pushed on to us across the state, across the country. How can we remedy that? We can remedy that by turning the power back over to the local boards, the local teachers, and the local parents. I think also, there's a wage problem there. But when we look at how the money is distributed, when they take our tax money and then hand it back to us, I know recently I heard a story about a school that had to lay off personnel, but they also had to spend money on a capital project, building something they didn't need in fear of losing that money. So if we turn the control back over to the local boards, back over to the parents, back over to the teachers, they can decide where that money needs to be spent. Certainly wages might be more important to some than others.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Holcomb?
It's important to keep in mind that on this front that there is a shortage of what is estimated to be about 60,000 needed teachers across the country. So Indiana is not in a unique position, but we can take care of our own in Indiana. And it does start with treating our teachers with respect as the professionals that they are, as they were role models throughout my entire life. I would not be standing here but for the teachers' influence in my life each and every step along the way. We must insist on working with the locals, with the school corporations, to make sure that the money that we are investing, Indiana invests 54% of our total budget in K through 12. We are second in the nation in that commitment, and that is a good thing. We need to make sure that we continue down this path, investing in the teachers that invest in you. It is an investment. But we need to make sure that that money is getting into the classroom, to the teacher and to the student. And that's where I will lead this discussion, with the locals.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. And now I'd like to offer each candidate a 30-second rebuttal period, beginning with Mr. Gregg.
Again, I'd just like to remind all of the students, this is something I'd really like to encourage you to go into and consider doing. Teaching is a profession. Think about it. Sadly, talk with your teachers, and this problem's been created over the last 10 years. Flat salaries, telling teachers how to teach as opposed to letting them teach in the classroom. But it's a very, very noble profession. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and I wouldn't be here either if it were not for teachers.
Mr. Bell?
Everybody has the good idea on how to fix it. The problem we see so much of the time is after the election. People run for office and they say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. I would suggest take a look at what has happened. How has it been handled for the last 100 years? As I say, I think we have better ideas, new ideas that you will hear from all parties before the election, but you're only going to hear it after the election from one party.
Well, again, it's just not about the dollars and cents. We, in the last budget cycle, just increased K through 12 funding by $474 million. We've done about $1 billion plus over the last 10 years. But it's not just about allocating more money, it's where that money ends up. And we're going to have to encourage more teachers and pay them appropriately to go into the profession and ultimately have an influence on your life and the direction of our state.
Thank you. Now we'll go to another question from a student. Asking it is Tylen Johnson, a junior at Short Ridge High School.
How can students engage directly with their government leaders in order to inspire change in their communities?
Mr. Bell, you can go first. Oh, can you please repeat the question?
How can students engage directly with their government leaders in order to inspire change in their communities?
Well, what you're doing right now. get involved, talk to people. You know, when there are so many people, especially young people, that are not involved at all in politics. And I think the moderator mentioned earlier something along the lines of just because you don't take interest in politics doesn't mean that the politicians aren't going to take an interest in you. Somebody's going to run this thing. Get involved, run for office, write letters, go and talk to the people. I think what you're doing now by being here today, by taking an interest, I think it's the most important thing you can do. You've got to pay attention. You're going to be the ones paying for all the decisions that we make. Eventually, it's going to come back on you. So I think you're doing a good job being here today and paying attention. Thank you.
Great question. I'll tell you, if you want to get a politician's attention, write a letter to the editor, get it printed, and call them out by name. I promise you they will read it or someone will send it to them. You have a real advantage today. You have an app to get someone's attention in virtually countless ways. You can do it from the privacy of wherever you are, whenever you're there. So I would encourage you to get engaged, volunteer on a campaign, apply to be an intern in someone's office, whether it's going to a town hall meeting, going to the mayor's office, or going to the local congressional office or the senator's office or the governor's office. Engage yourself and take the initiative to say, I'm interested in my future and I'm going to be a part of it and I'm going to help drive it. And I guarantee you will get the attention of who you're meeting with.
Absolutely. You're probably dealing with three people here who've always followed and liked politics from a young age. And so exactly what you're doing, study the issues. And I know how much you all have to study and you spend hours reading, but read, study, talk, follow, check out our web pages. Mine's gregforgovernor.com, but check out our web pages. You know, look, talk, do volunteer for campaigns. We're very proud that this summer we had over 40 volunteers just in our Indianapolis office of college-age students. We have high school students that hit at about a dozen sites all around the state who help us make telephone calls and knock on doors. I'd really encourage you to do that because the more you're involved, the more you know about the issues, it's going to help all of us be better citizens. So thank you very much. That's a great question.
Each candidate will now have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal, beginning with Mr. Bell.
Well, I'm not sure there's anything to rebut there. We all agree that you need to be involved, and I appreciate that you are out here doing it, and just hang right in there and watch us because we're going to be watching you.
Yeah, I would say right after you visit my friend John's website, go to holcombforindiana.com. holcombforindiana.com. I also would encourage you to diversify your interests. Make sure that you are, when you're volunteering, when you're offering your services, because there's only one candidate, but there is an army of support beneath them that really fuel the whole organization. You should learn each and every one of those jobs to better determine for yourself one day, when you're up here on this stage running for governor, if we're doing our job right.
And then I just want to encourage you to come back to my webpage, okay? But you know, we have a kind of a joke at our campaign. They say that it takes a village to raise a candidate. And like Mr. Holcomb said, he's absolutely true. There are so many people. You see the three of us standing up here. There are so many countless hundreds of people that make all the difference in helping us prepare for debates, helping us with issues. I've talked and listened to hundreds of people across the state in the last year and a half.
Thank you. Our next questioner is Isaiah Gray, a sophomore at Arsenal Tech High School.
How would you expand job opportunities for youth during the school year and during the summer, especially youth from economically deprived areas?
And Mr. Holcomb can answer first.
Were you referring to the school year? And repeat the question if you could, just for my benefit.
How would you expand job opportunities for the youth during the school year and during the summer, especially youth from economically deprived areas?
Yeah, great question, and it's the way of the future right now. everywhere I go, whether it's talking with folks that are in the building trades, or to Boston Scientific, or to Cook Pharmaceutical, to the folks that are building jet engines, these new companies, the high-tech companies that are coming to the state of Indiana, the jobs that are the real high-wage jobs in the way of the future, they're looking for internships. They're coming here because they know that they can reach into our high schools and to our world-class universities and get you involved and groom you so that you're not just graduating from high school and then entering some occupation that may be or may not be inspiring, but you're actually doing something that you're passionate about, that you love to do. And the organizations and the companies of the future, they're looking for that commitment, not just their commitment to you, they're looking for your commitment to them. So apply yourself. The guidance counselors can be critically important in this transition in high schools. And so I would encourage you to be working not just with your school organization.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. Now we go to Mr. Gregg.
You know, as I've traveled the state, I've not had one businessman or woman say anything about our tax structure in Indiana. What they do talk about is the need for those skilled employees. And there's a great book I would encourage you to read. And man, I know you got a lot of stuff to read, but it's called Talent. And it's written by a guy here in Indianapolis called Jamie Marasotis, who says that in the next 5 years in Indiana, we could create up to 300,000 living wage jobs, but we got to have the talent in order to fill them. So that's where education comes in and is so important. It's better aligning our education. It's better letting students know, you know, what jobs are out there. It means having more guidance counselors where you can get more direction as you're going through school. You know, when people graduate, I've heard different superintendents say the 3 E's. They want them enrolled, they want them employed or enlisted. And I think we need to have that discussion. There's jobs out there. It's helping you find them, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Mr. Bell?
Well, I certainly believe it's important for students to have jobs. All 3 of my kids worked all the way through school. As far as providing those jobs and finding those jobs, I think the schools need to work with the local businesses that are looking for employees. And we even get into the point where the businesses are helping train students for the type of job that they're needing to fulfill. So I think there's a partnership there between the private community and the schools that can benefit all students, plus benefiting the businesses, and one of those win-win situations we don't like to talk about, but I think that's what it is. I think we have a lot of opportunities by joining those groups together to provide jobs for students.
The candidates will have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal, beginning with Mr. Holcomb.
When you think about long-term, I mentioned at the outset the knowing where we are now, where we were 10 years ago, and where we're looking out 10 years. We know that we're going to have to replace 1 million new job openings, employees over the next 10 years. So 1 million new people, folks retiring, folks dropping out of the workforce, et cetera. That's where you come in. And if you can immerse yourself in these out-of-school activities that
Thank
are
you, Mr. Holcomb. Mr. Gregg?
job-related.
I just encourage you to check out our webpage. We've got a 35-point economic development plan. We talk about some summer youth programs. We talk about some issues in economic development for young people, training. I think that's a key place to go to, and we cross-reference it with our education program where, again, we talk about job training and better aligning those. Know you're busy, but if you get a chance, check that out, particularly the part on the summer youth program. I think you'll find it real helpful.
Mr. Bell?
Well, it takes me about 30 seconds to stand up, so that doesn't give me a lot of time to speak. But certainly, as we mentioned earlier, pay attention, get out and look for jobs. The business is there, and I think that we can coordinate schools and the businesses and provide more opportunities for jobs. And I've got a couple seconds left, so mine is electrexbell.com.
Now we come to what we call the Lincoln-Douglas debate segment. Mr. Bell will go first and can talk to up to 1 minute on the topic of his choice. Mr. Holcomb will follow on that same topic for 1 minute. Mr. Gregg will then also speak on the topic for 1 minute. Then Mr. Bell will close out that topic with 30 seconds of rebuttal. The other two candidates will then have the opportunity to speak on the topic of their choice, following the normal rotation and format. So I will open first with Mr. Bell.
Well, you know, one thing that I look at as I've been in forums and debates and talking to people around the state, something that we're going to see in this election, we're going to see a lot of solutions that basically amount to trying to get the government to fix something that the government fouled up in the first place. We're going to see a lot of that in education especially. We offer a solution of turning control back over to the parents, back over to the teachers, back over to the local schools. And as we've brought this up, and I've heard the other parties come along and say, yes, that's an excellent idea, that's what we should do, but, you know, we're not convinced after the election that's what's going to happen. We think we're still going to see more government intervention where it shouldn't be. The government should be collecting the money for schools, handing it back to the locals, and letting them decide.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Holcomb?
Well, we were just most recently rated the 4th freest state in the country, and I'm very proud of that. We have, when I first came to office, or into the governor's office working for our former governor, Mitch Daniels, we had scaled back the state employee rolls back to the Nixon years that you mentioned at the outset. So we have proven that you can do more with less if you grow the economy, if the pie gets bigger, if you're bringing in more revenue. So we are in strong fiscal shape. We have low debt, especially when you compare us to the competition. So we're on the right track. We just need to keep going.
You know, our education system, or our education plan is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's pre-kindergarten, optional for the parents, for the students, but universal, so all students can take advantage of it. It's what our business leaders and our teachers tell us we need. The second thing is to stop teaching to the test. Let teachers teach again. You know, make it something where we get instant feedback or quicker feedback so they can learn what the issues are. And then it has to do with better aligning the job market and our school education. And we do that by being inclusive and giving local control back. Then it's about college. It's making college affordable and accessible. And that's a real tough challenge. I know that as a former president at Vincennes University. But these are the issues we have to deal with. So it's the pre-kindergarten, stop the teaching to the test, better align our curriculum, and make college or post-high school training and credentialing affordable and accessible.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. And Mr. Bell, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
30 seconds isn't very long, but I would point out that, yeah, Indiana's in pretty good shape. When we talk about a surplus, we need to remember, you know, perhaps that we have pensions, public pensions that are underfunded by billions of dollars, so we don't necessarily consider that something that you can just blink away. And also pre-K, you know, I know now they're talking voluntary, but eventually it will come around to a where it's mandatory. We would like to see stronger families.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mr. Holcomb, you may speak for 1 minute on the topic of your choice, and we'll continue in that procession.
Yes, well, again, when I first came into this service with former Governor Mitch Daniels, we ushered in Indiana's comeback. We turned the state around. We quit spending more money than we were taking in. We now, as my friend Rex points out, we now sit on a AAA credit rating. We do have $2.24 billion in reserve that helps us maintain that credit rating. We have a 4.5 unemployment rate. Our wages are going up in the right direction year after year after year. So we're on the right path. And I don't just cite those figures to throw them out at you. I cite them to illustrate what a good position the state's in so that we can make record investments into infrastructure, so that we can make record investments into education. So many other states are in the opposite position, and we're competing against them. So when we invest in you, more in you, we expect more. And what we're going to find is our workforce, our talent that we attract and grow and groom here will make the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. Mr. Gregg?
You know, the reality in Indiana is Hoosiers are working harder and harder and taking home less and less. They just don't see it. Our per capita income in the state of Indiana in the last few years has slid to where we're 38th. That doesn't mean anything to you, but let me take it home to you. That means a family of 4 living here in Lawrence Township makes $7,000 a year less. That's $600 a month. That affects your family. That affects the clothes you wear and the food you eat. We can do better in Indiana, but we've got to focus on the economy. We've got to be open-minded. We've got to be inclusive. We've got to admit that, you know, we've got money in the bank, but at what expense? We need a surplus, and I'm glad we've got one. But look at our infrastructure. Look at our schools. Look at our communities. At what expense? When my roof leaks, I fix it. And I think we've got a leaky roof right now in Indiana.
Mr. Bell?
Well, certainly, you know, we talk about wages, and you know, that's understandable. Of course, we also need to understand the cost of living in Indiana is lower than it is in other states. My son moved to San Diego, and he told me the story that he moved out of Olive Branch, Mississippi, and he said he went from being the richest man in Olive Branch, Mississippi, to the poorest man in San Diego. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. You know, we have an affordable cost of living in Indiana. Certainly we need more jobs. Education will certainly contribute to that. We also just need a plan to get more businesses in here so that when there's more business, there are more jobs. When people can compete for jobs, wages go up. You know, we think that Indiana needs some major tweaking, and we think that we're the people to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. And Mr. Holcomb, you have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal.
Well, yes, when we talk about wages in 2005, coming into this service, in 2005 we were hovering around $17 an hour, and today we're over $21 an hour. So we're headed in the right direction. And for sure, during that big recession of 2008, 2009, we did tick down 17 cents, but we immediately shot back up. And where are we now? Now, because we're strengthened and diversified in our economy, we're attracting the sales forces and the Genesises. We're outpacing high-tech job growth by 3 times the national average here.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. Mr. Gregg, you have 1 minute for the topic of your choice.
You know, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I've done different things in my life. I've had public sector, I've had private sector, and academic experience. Many years ago, under Governors Bob Orr, who many of you maybe never even heard of, a wonderful man, Bob Orr, Evan Bayh, and Frank O'Bannon served in the legislature, served as Speaker of the House. I'm very proud of that. And during the time I was Speaker of the House, I'm very proud that every piece of legislation that landed on the governor's desk had Democrat and Republican support. I've worked in small business. I've helped create jobs. I've worked for 2 Fortune 500 companies in the energy field. I understand complex bureaucracies. And I had the pleasure of serving as president at Vincennes University and dealt with many, many young people who were from this area and know what it takes to bring people together, take the best ideas from Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Mr. Bell?
Well, a little bit about myself then. I'm a small business owner. I started Bell Contracting in 1974, so I have been surviving despite government for 42 years. I know what the regulations do. I know what the restrictions that they place on us. I know what when government tells you how you're going to live your life, when they take your money and then dole it back to you in education and say these are the restrictions that you have to follow. I know what that places on it. I believe that people are capable of making their own decisions, and that's the type of government that we would like to bring back to you, a government that protects you from force and fraud. Other than that, allows you to make your own decisions about your lifestyle, about your education.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Holcomb?
Love this topic. This has been part of my DNA my entire life, is trying to bring people together to not just identify or admire problems, but actually solve them. And my track record would suggest we've been pretty successful in that in the governor's office over the years. I can just cite a few examples, whether it's property tax reform, where we cut and cap property taxes, or bringing together strange bedfellows. You hear that in the political arena a lot. It was my job to reach out to both the labor community and the business community. I would literally go into some offices and people would say, "Don't sit down, young man, you're not going to be here that long." But after the course of breaking the ice and engaging in conversation, we were able to get a deal done because we both laid all of our cards on the table, face up, we're very transparent, and we said, this is about the future. This is about the next generation. And thankfully, that's how we've moved this state forward each and every year since.
You know, I want to mention somebody who was real important to me making the decision to run for governor again. I ran 4 years ago, closest race in 50 years. You still don't get anything when you finish second, though. But let me share with you. My wife asked me in November of 2014, she says, "John, do you want to be governor or do you want to serve as governor?" And she said, if it's about being governor, you know, if it's about a title and the trappings, you know, that's not what you ought to do. But if it's really about serving and having a servant's heart and tackling those tough issues and bringing us together,
Thank you,
that's
Mr.
what
Gregg.
you should do.
I'd like to ask a question that's important to me as a professor, and I think will be important to many of these high school, soon-to-be college students in the room. After the Great Recession, almost every state, including Indiana, cut support for higher education. With the need to create and retain a qualified workforce, should the state increase its support for higher education, especially where the cost of going to college far outpace inflation? And we'll begin with Mr. Holcomb.
We absolutely need to be committed to our world-class universities and our colleges, private and public. This is a real asset in the state of Indiana when the job creators around the world, around the country are looking at where to locate. They factor in our university-level courses and the output that comes from that. And so absolutely we have to be committed to this. The exciting thing is the Commission of Higher Education just put out a college value index. I would encourage you to see it. It's somewhat unique, but it literally scores and it will help students considering what that next step is, what path they want to choose, whether it's online at WGU, whether it's Ivy Tech, whether it's IU, Notre Dame. Got to get a plug in for Hanover College where I went. We offer a diverse portfolio when it comes to what your next steps could be. If you've started college and take a break, I just want to encourage you to finish. That is the biggest predictor of where you will end up. We need to make sure our students are finishing what they start.
Holcomb.
You know, I think there's three things we can specifically do, and as a former president of Vincennes University, have some experience in this. First thing we need to do is incentivize our colleges to go out and seek more scholarships and financial aid. And that's something that's out there. That means they work with the philanthropic communities and with the federal government to get more. We also need to look at the matrix, because right now we fund Ivy Tech the same way we fund a research institution like Purdue or IU. And the third thing is we probably need to borrow an idea what former governor and president of Purdue University, Governor Daniels, has done. He has held the line on tuition increases for the last 5 years. So I think it's important that we'd see what he's done that we might be able to adapt to the other universities. I think it's time we have those discussions in those three areas.
Well, certainly we need to encourage higher education. I think we need to consider the fact that in Indiana, you can go to a public college, community college. You can, you know, I'm not talking about your room and board and that sort of thing, but you can get an associate's degree for $8,000. You can get a 4-year degree for $16,000 to $20,000. Very affordable. When you start adding room and board onto that, certainly it gets a little more out of hand that way. But you're in a situation in Indiana where you can get an affordable education. If you're not willing to invest $4,000 a year in your education, you know, why would we expect the taxpayers to do that? So I think we need to encourage people to attend. We also need to accept the fact that people have to take on their own responsibility. Certainly, if we could get a handle on what the government's loaning out, it would change
Thank you,
things.
Mr. Bell. We have the opportunity for 30 seconds rebuttal.
Yes, we absolutely need to encourage our higher education institutions to hold the line when it comes to spending and remain competitive. Former Governor Mitch Daniels, and now President of Purdue, has in fact froze tuition for the last 5 years, and it has encouraged his competitors to do the same and respond in like mind. And so that kind of leadership is critical, but we also need to make sure, starting at your level, that we're getting you on the right path so that you do,
Thank you.
if you do take out a
Thank you,
loan,
Mr.
you're on the right
Holcomb.
track.
Mr. Gregg?
You know, I just think this is a situation where you realize that college is expensive. We need to change our mindset a little also. Four-year degrees, absolutely, they're out there. But don't forget, there's two-year degrees, and there's certification, and there's apprentice programs. There are so many things out there where you can be a contributing member of society and have a great paying job. So I want to thank you, and just keep that in mind. 4 years is not for everybody, but there's a lot of other opportunities
Thank
there.
you, Mr. Gregg.
Certainly, freezing tuition is commendable, but I also think that we can get into a situation where we can lower, tuition from where it stands now because of the federal government involvement with the loans that has encouraged a lot of colleges to raise their prices because they knew there was no problem raising the funds. I think we have a lot of different options. There's no magic button, but I think we can do better than freezing college tuition. I think we can convince them to lower it.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.